Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. I'm your host, Andrea Vacca, and I'm excited to welcome Sharon Pope to the podcast today. Sharon is a certified master life coach, and she works with couples and clients to help them get the tools they need to improve or heal or release the marriages that they may be struggling in. So she's a 7-time international best-selling author on love and relationships, and she's been published dozens of times, actually, in various publications, including the New York Times, and is a host of her own podcast, The Loving Truth. So, Sharon, welcome to A Better Divorce podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am too. I'm really looking forward to our conversation because we both work with strong, successful women who are struggling in unhappy marriages.
Yes.
And as a coach, you're helping them to get the clarity they need to either repair it or end it.
Mhm.
And I was looking at your website and it really jumped out at me when you said to make these decisions without regret, right?
Yes.
So you need to go into this decision-making process with clarity so you can come out with clarity. Like you need to go into it with purpose, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone who's done whatever they can to make their marriage work, but then they come to the realization that it must end,
Mhm.
how do you help them set themselves up so they're in the best position possible to now take that step and move into hopefully a better divorce?
Well, the first thing is to know that you've really done everything that you can, because I think that we'll never regret giving anything our best effort. And so when we give it our best effort and it still doesn't work, that may not be the answer that we want, but it certainly is an answer that we can make peace with, to be able to move through the next really hard thing, which is unwinding a marriage, as you very well know, is not an easy or short and painless process. So part of what I equip them to do is how to maintain their own peace through what might feel like not naturally a very peaceful process, and how to set yourself up for it going as peacefully as it possibly can in the midst of hurt and pain and a whole bunch of unknowns for both of you.
Well, the first step that when clients come to us and say that they want a divorce, but they're not sure what process, or they haven't told their
Mm.
spouse yet that they want the divorce, right? They've made this decision, but that's about it.
Right.
So how do you best, and so we have advice on how to prepare, let their spouse know, but we're coming from it from a legal point of view, but also a very, emotionally connected point of view. We want to help them. We're very empathetic to what they're dealing with and what they're going to receive when they and make this announcement. But we're not certified master life coaches. So how do you suggest somebody prepare for that conversation with their spouse, letting them know that they've made this decision?
Okay, so I think that the preparation here is really, really important, that we don't give enough time and attention to, because how you set this up is going to not dictate, but certainly influence how the rest of it is going to go. So if you start from a place of a lot of just anger and venom and hurt and that, it's just going to be an uphill battle. But if you start from a place of real compassion, that we did our best to love each other and it didn't go as planned, and that we both deserve happiness. And if you can start from that place, then it's not guaranteed that it will go peacefully, but it is so much more likely that it will go peacefully. But sadly, what most of us do is we wait till there's some big argument, and then that's when we blow it all up, because that's when we have courage. We're brave when we're mad. So what I do is some of that prep work is, let's talk about the big three: when, where, and what are you going to say?
Okay.
So where are you going to have this conversation? Obviously, you want to be in a place where you're alone and it's quiet and you can focus. So you're going to need to put your devices away. The kids are going to need to be very occupied. And by very occupied, I mean, ideally not where you are.
Out of the house. Right.
Out of the house. If it's going to happen in the house, kids cannot be in the house while you're having this conversation. There's going to be emotion on one or both sides. So that's not something that they need a front row seat to. Then there's the when. So when are you going to have this conversation? And that can relate to the kids too, because when are the kids going to be gone? And I need you to think about this, because if it's not like you're going to have this conversation, oh, and then, oh, it's dinner time, so let's make dinner and sit down and have dinner together. No, you're going to need time to, both of you are going to need to step away and process what's happening. And while you may have been thinking about it for years and coming to this decision, your partner is just hearing about it now. So they've had 60 seconds to process. And so they're not going to want to sit down and have dinner with you. And they're not going to be able to go and crush their big meeting the next day, right? So think about the timing of what makes sense for you and your family. Okay. Then there's the what to say. And I call this 3 to 5 sentences. Do not overthink this. This is where most people get stuck. Well, there's 2 places people get stuck, but the first one is, what do I say? How do I have this conversation? And what I always just say, and maybe this is the most important thing I can tell you today, is this is not a conversation where you're seeking understanding or agreement. This is a conversation where you're expressing a decision that you've made. And so until you're at that point, you're not ready to have that conversation anyway. Okay. So if you go in thinking, he'll understand, I'll give him all the reasons, and then he or she will be ready to go along this path with me. No, it very rarely works that way. So the 3 to 5 sentences, let's just talk about what that can be. So
Sure.
break it down. 3 sentences. Let's say it's, what I have to share with you is probably going to be very hard to hear because it's difficult for me to say. I've done everything I know how to do to make this marriage feel good, and I haven't been able to do that. So for me, something has to change. And I feel like our best next step here is to separate. Or you can say divorce. That's the third sentence. Divorce brings up a lot of emotion, right? So sometimes people will say separate because it feels like a softer approach.
Yeah.
The fourth sentence might be, this is going to be hard on all of us. And you have my commitment that I'm going to make this as peaceful and drama-free as possible. And I hope I can count on you for that too. And then the fifth sentence might be something along the lines of, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this didn't work out. I'm sorry we couldn't be the partners we each needed each other to be. I'm sorry. I know this is painful. Whatever. I'm saying I'm sorry from a genuine place never hurts. So that's why I'm like, don't overthink it. This is 3 to 5 sentences.
Perfect. And I didn't hear you, what you didn't say and what you're not telling people to do is, I've been saying this forever. I've been telling you this is coming. I've been unhappy. You didn't change. We,
No,
you're never going to be what I need. It's not about them anymore. It's
no.
what I hear you say. It's about me, the decision I've made,
Mhm,
how I want to be if we're going to end this marriage, how I promise I will be and
mhm.
be as peaceful as possible. So it's all about you.
Yeah,
And so there's nothing for them to do here because you've made your decision.
right. And as soon as you start pointing that finger at them, then they want to defend themselves. And then we get into, like, this turns into an 8-hour emotionally charged, sometimes knockdown, drag out conversation. That's not what you want.
Yeah.
It can be a 20 to 30 minute peaceful, compassionate, and respectful conversation between 2 adults doing really
Right.
big adult things.
Now I've definitely had these conversations with clients, the how, the when, what you're going to say, but they don't always do it.
No.
So it's not like, it makes me think you just need more coaching. So make sure you're ready. Role play, try it out with somebody else. I
Oh
don't
my
know.
gosh, Andrea, I tell people, like, first of all, write down your 3 to 5 sentences, carry it with you, recite it once a day, twice a day. I had a client who she carried it in her purse, she put it in her bra, she had it with her for like a month before she was ready to say it, because my friends, You can say it up here in your mind all day long, every day. You probably have been. You can say it to your lawyer, to your coach, to your best friend. It's a whole nother thing for it to come through your vocal cords to say it face to face with this other human being that even if you want to divorce them, you do care about them to some degree, right? So it's a whole different thing. So you got to practice, and it's not about performing. It's about being able to get it out and not backpedal.
In that authentic I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go
Um,
ahead. Yeah,
yeah, in that authentic way. It's really your truth. You're speaking your truth, and then they will hear it differently because
right,
it's not about getting their permission or they're okay
right.
to
That
do
is
this.
that is a completely different conversation. And if you
Yeah,
go into it thinking you need their permission, it's an entirely different dumpster fire.
yeah.
Don't
And
do it.
and and if that's been the dynamic in your relationship, that's gonna be the automatic dynamic in this conversation if you do not prepare.
Yeah.
So,
And you know
I
what
think
I will also say is just because they ask a question doesn't mean it requires an answer, right? We think that every question deserves an answer. Maybe it doesn't
right,
because,
you could say, "I don't know," or "I
right?
can't
Because as soon as
say."
you start giving them all the answers to all their questions, they're just going to look to how can I turn that around? How can I change that? How can I get rid of this reason? Because if I can get rid of the reasons, I can get rid of your decision. And so they're just looking, they're hurting, right? They're human beings. They're hurting. They don't want this outcome many times. At least the people who find me. Like if you come together with your spouse and you're like, I think we should divorce, and your spouse is like, cool, I think that's a great idea. Okay, lovely. You probably don't need Andrea and I,
Very, very rare.
but it never really works that way.
So what I see is it's typically the women and more I've been practicing family law for over 30 years, and I can say not just in the last 5 or 10 years, but in the last maybe half of the time, it's definitely been more women
Yeah.
asking for divorce. Um, and so I think it's more common now than back those years ago.
Mhm.
And so I'd like your input on why do you think that is that more women today are the ones having to be coached on this conversation?
Mm.
Because it's not like they've done something wrong or they caught their spouse doing something. It's a decision they've made. They've been unhappy. They end the marriages. More and more that's happening from what I see from the women making those decisions as opposed to the men. So what are you seeing on your side of the couch, I guess?
This is not let's if we go back in the way back machine, right? Marriage was created when women were still considered property, right? It was another, and that's uncomfortable to say, but it wasn't about love. It wasn't about passion. It certainly wasn't about respect. It was about another person to take care of the man. So that was how it was. That's where marriage was created. But now, or let's say one generation ago, my mother's generation. So I'm 52. My mother's generation, like I was born in the early 70s. So while and my mom worked, like once I went to kindergarten, she worked. So I think she was a progressive woman. I like it. But
But
but we didn't have many freedoms even one generation ago. We still needed men for providing and for protecting. And protection wasn't so much that like we had to hunt for our own food or anything like that. It was more social protection in my mom's day and age. Because if you were 30 years old and you weren't married and you didn't have children and like there was something wrong with you. So it was more like social protection. And then the providing is very explanatory. Everyone had their roles. Like my mom had her role, everything to do with the kids in the house. That was what she did. And then when she went back to work, it's not like she renegotiated, okay, well, now I'm going to work. And now we still have all these responsibilities that we've created as a couple. Let's sit down and just talk about like how we're going to handle it. Nope, we didn't do that. So women just took on, I'm going to work outside the home and I'm still going to do all the things in the home. Right. And so now the dynamic between men and women in relationship, women have a lot of freedom. We don't need men for providing and for protecting because like providing, well, we can earn a living, and protecting, there's not this social stigma with divorce anymore. We all know someone who's been divorced, right? So
yeah,
it's not that unusual. And so now those dynamics have changed and there's no class on any of this. I always joke that like my husband loves to fish. You need a license to fish. You don't need a license to get married. You don't have to take a course. You don't have to pass a test. You don't have to do anything. You just go, let's go into it. I love you, darling. Let's hope for the best for the next 6 decades, shall we? And then we wonder why marriages are suffering. So we've not been equipped.
So women, are more free, do not need men as much.
Yeah.
They are going to, make these decisions based on what they need, and I think it's been also what I'm seeing is because women are not necessarily giving up all that work at home either, though.
Right.
They've they are still out in the world making money, making more than their husbands, having extremely successful lives,
Hmm.
but still keeping so much control over the children and the home and the family and the social life. And so it's very A type personality, women,
Yes.
all of this wanting to do all of these things well and perfect and have it all
Hmm.
has caused a lot of resentment in marriages. And I, I often think of these quotes. This quote, it's St. Augustine who said, resentment is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Hmm.
And I see that so much in these types of dynamic in the divorces when the couple had this type of dynamic. There's so much resentment
Yeah.
for what the spouse, their husband did, and this is heterosexual marriages,
Right.
primarily I'm seeing.
Right.
They're resentful of what their husband didn't do and well enough, didn't earn enough money, didn't take care of the kids enough, didn't wasn't the right life partner.
Well,
So,
I mean, let's be
what do
clear.
you
Who taught our husbands what it looks like to be a man, a husband, and a father? But their father. And what it meant to be a husband and a father and a man 30, 40, 50 years ago, it almost has no bearing on today. I mean, it's that different. Like I joked that I always joke that like my dad was across the street getting a sandwich when I was born, and I don't think he ever changed my diaper. I'm pretty sure we joked about that growing up. If he did, it wasn't often, right? So what his job was is you go to work and you don't screw up too much. And so now we have very different expectations. The problem is, as women, we don't talk about it. We think it's an understood that it will be equal. When, my friends, it hasn't been equal since the beginning of time. I don't know what you're smoking or how you think this is going to work without you talking about it. Like the day that I find someone who's actually made an exhaustive list of here's all the things that we need to keep our lives running for all the choices that we've made. We made the choice to get this house. We made the choice to have a pool in the backyard. We made the choice to have 3 children. And so, what does it take to make our lives work? Let's make an exhaustive list and let's figure out how we're going to get this stuff done. And it doesn't all have to be you and I, by the way. We can hire some help too. But we don't do that. We assume that our partners are going to see what needs to be done and they're going to do it. And by the way, we really think they're going to do it our way. And that's
that's
the
the
part that some women don't really want to own is that like we don't want to give up the stuff because we want it done our way. But then we resent that we don't have quote help with the things. And I'm like, no, it's not help. That makes me start to twitch when women say like he doesn't help.
yeah,
I'm like, no, this
when
is this is you two are taking responsibility for the things that you've chosen to create together. It's not help.
yeah, he's babysitting the kids,
No,
right?
no,
Doesn't
no,
he
no, no,
like
no.
a paid caretaker?
But that's all like positioning. That's all how you two think about. That's a mindset shift. And you can shift that, but you have to do it first.
So we help couples with prenuptial agreements,
Okay.
and sometimes they'll start talking about how they wanna run the household. Rarely do they get into all of this, but I could see it could be very productive conversation
Yeah.
to make that kind of list, and how are we gonna do this? No one's asked yet. It's not a legal issue, but
Mm-mm.
it could help. So anyone who's not married, you might wanna take listen to Sharon and make that list. But let's talk about when you've had this marriage where there's been a lot of con attempts to, I should say, there's resentment now because of things that weren't done the right way or how you expected it during the marriage.
Yeah.
How do you coach those women who are coming out of this marriage feeling very resentful, not to go into the divorce with that same resentment, and how to shift it so that they can have a different relationship perhaps as divorced parents who will need to be in each other's lives? What advice would you have for those women?
So part of what I think is help, it's beyond helpful. I stuttered on helpful because I'm like, oh, it's such a big deal. But most people aren't willing to do it. And here's what it is: look for what is my role in the creation of this experience? What can I own about how we got to this place? Most people don't want to do that. They want to point the blame somewhere else because that's easy. But I promise you, if you're willing to do that, because every relationship, it's never one sided, right? Even if your partner is 90% of the issue in your mind and you're 10%, when you can own that 10%, you can go, okay, if I did that and it created this outcome, and if I don't like that outcome and I don't want to keep recreating that experience, then I can do it differently in the future. And this is how, I mean, Andrea knows the stats better than me, but second and third marriages divorce at a much higher rate even than first marriages. And first marriages aren't a great bet because we're not equipped to come into them with success. So I would just say that if you can just keep in mind that, like, you're both hurting. Because even though, like, so in my first marriage, I was the one asking for divorce. People sometimes think when you're the one asking, you get to bypass all the pain. And that's not true. You still have things to reckon with. But if you can own your part in the creation of your experience, it gives you power back in your own life. And so that's the biggest thing that you can do to help you move forward, and also to help you realize that, like, this isn't a failure and there doesn't have to be a villain in this story. It can just be two people who tried to love each other the best they could until they couldn't.
That's That's such a beautiful way to look at it, and not blame yourself, not blame anyone else, just accept that this didn't work, and at this and it only worked until stopped working.
Right.
We did what we could, and to release it. That's a very healthy way to look at it.
I feel like I don't actually know that this is true. Most of the things I teach, I'm like, this is true. But this is one that I'll tell people, like, I'm not actually sure, but I will tell you it brings me a lot of peace. And that is that if you can find the place, the mental place of everyone's just doing the best they can with what they've got in their toolkit, from that place, you can soften. There's no need to, like, when you're in the arena and you're battling it out, you're still fighting for the marriage. But when you're ready to release the marriage, there's no reason to keep fighting. What are you fighting for? Charger plates? The Vitamix? What are, like,
Eh,
it's just, let's release this.
I think it is true, and when I start my mediations, I ask couples to create goals for how they wanna be and work
Mm,
together in this process, the mediation process, and one of the goals I'll encourage, if they don't bring it up themselves, is to give the other person the benefit of the doubt
yes.
that and that what they're saying is their truth, and that they're being truthful, and that they're saying what they need and mean, and it's not about you. And also
Mm.
to work harder trying to understand the other person than trying to convince them of your own thoughts and feelings, and that you're right, you know? So those 2 things together.
Which, by the way, is probably the very thing that got in the way of the marriage to begin with, right? The
Exactly.
need to be right and the need to control the situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you wanna have a successful divorce, you're going to have to release that for the time being, and hopefully moving on, because you no longer have to go home with this person after a while. You'll no longer have to go home with them.
Right.
They're not in your life. It's very limited about the things that you'll be working with them on, perhaps the kids. So let's talk about that need to control, okay?
Hmm.
Where for those, and we're talking about women right now, when women have been coming out of these marriages where they're very used to controlling things, but they're very resentful that their husband didn't step up and do things the way that they would have wanted and expected, and now they're in the divorce process. I see that need to control, especially when they have children, primarily when they have children,
Yeah.
is still so strong.
Yeah.
So what is going on there that and how do you help clients release that need to feel in control of everything when they're gonna have even less control, they're not living together anymore. Their
Right.
children will not be with them all the time.
Right.
So, you had mentioned, I think prior to our when we were talking before the show that, control comes from fear. So,
Yeah.
um, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Most people who are controlling, and I only spot it because I got it. Okay. So this is not judgment. This is just self-awareness. um, when we are in the place of where we're trying to control the situation, and most of us find that, or we think about our need to control as a way to get things done and to get it done right. So we're kind of proud of it. The problem is that control always stems, if you trace it back, it always originates in some place of fear. And what I mean by that is I'm not safe. I'm not safe in my world. I'm not safe in this marriage. My children aren't safe. There's something that I don't feel comfortable with. And so I have to try to control the essentially uncontrollable, which is the circumstances and the people in my environment. And my friends, it is a hard way to live. It is almost an impossible way to be in relationship with another human being because none of us came here to be a puppet to someone else. None of us. Not your children, not your husband, not your wife, no one. Right? They're here to create their experience. So until you trace back what is the fear that I'm so afraid of, you're not going to solve that piece of needing to control, and you will continue to struggle in your relationships.
How do you coach someone to figure out what the fear actually is?
It's actually it's like day one. You sign up with Sharon Pope, the very first video you're watching is like how to understand your fears, how to learn how to navigate the fears, and how to create a different outcome because the fears don't go away. Like there's nothing wrong with you because you're in fear. Like I had a client, her husband, he had a thriving dental practice, and she had three children. One, her youngest, was a special needs child. So she had lots of very valid reasons to be in fear, like being an entrepreneur and being dependent upon one income. There's a reason only 10% of the world becomes entrepreneurs. Like it's not for the faint of heart, right? And then she's got a special needs daughter. That is my daughter going to be okay? Are my other kids going to be okay? Like she's got lots of perfectly valid reasons in her mind. But the problem is that then she has to orchestrate and be in charge of everything. And it is just such a hard way to live. It's also like, if you think about it, it's a very tight way to live. It's very constricting because you're trying to control other people. You're trying to control circumstances. And we can't control every circumstance in our life. We can influence it, but we can't control it. And we most certainly cannot control other human beings because there's this little thing called free will. You'll find it like when your toddler's 3. Like it shows
Yeah.
up early.
Shows up early and it continues until they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years
Yep.
old.
My dad, 79, very difficult to control.
Yeah. And it's interesting, not funny, but interesting
Interesting, ironic
for
maybe.
ironic. And it's hard. And I feel for these clients who wanted the divorce, have not been happy.
Yeah,
Understand intellectually that the children will be with their husband or their spouse
yeah,
half the time or some amount of time
yeah,
that's will not be with them anymore.
yeah.
And it's as if it didn't really occur to them that this will be the outcome of what, emotionally, they didn't really prepare for this. And they can't get let go very easily.
Yeah. How do
And
you
he
prepare to not have your children half the
right,
time?
right.
Yeah. Talk about the big surrender, the big release, because you don't have control over it. And the reality is, like, I'll point out when my clients will say, like, my child, my son, my daughter. And I'm like, you mean our son, our daughter? Because they are. It took two of you to create this little human being. And that little human being needs both of you. even if you're very different, even if you parent in different styles, what they will learn is that they have choices and they have options and they get to choose because of free will.
Mhm.
So they're not, if they're not here to become my puppet and be who I want my children to be, and they're here to create their life experience, then my whole job is just to usher them through that and keep them safe, like the bumper guards, the bumper rails, when you're bowling.
Yes,
Just keep them
when you're bowling.
safe. But is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be the way? And by the way, you think perfect is the way that you would do it, which you don't actually know that. There's no like, here is the manual for raising the perfect child and for doing parenting perfectly. Like, we just do the best we
Another
can.
thing
We just do
another thing they don't give you a license for, right?
exactly the two biggest
Parenting.
things you will ever do in your life: who you marry and will you have children. We don't even need a license or any kind of training. Nothing. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what I have seen is that for those relationships where the male, in that more traditional heterosexual relationship, where the male has not been as involved with the children because the wife, the female, was so involved and kind of pushed the man aside in a way, or just you don't need to do this. I've got it. I've handled it. But then there's that resentment that builds up. But now he will need to make doctor's appointments and make sure the medication is taken and get the schoolwork done and the homework and make sure they have the right clothes on and the right things in their bag. And they haven't been had to do that before, but they have to be given a chance to do it. So that's why sometimes I'll suggest, let's start co-parenting like this while you're still living together. You can see this kid's not going to die. Like
Yeah.
you can see that they can step up and do these things. Give them the responsibility, step away in a safe place and help alleviate that fear if you can. If you can do it while you're still living together. Now's the time.
It's
But if
brilliant. Yeah.
not, right?
It's,
But if not, you have to let him usually
yeah.
do it.
It's
Do
perfect
what
advice. Yeah. To start doing it now so that because all you're doing is you're trying to calm your amygdala mind. That's all that's happening. The child is fine. It's really mom's the one that's freaking out because she's used to being in control. But if you can see it happening and you sort of are the safety net so that if they fall or they stumble, they don't fall too far. Okay, then that might put your amygdala at ease. I
yeah.
will tell you this, and it's not it has happened many, many, many times. But I'll give you the story of one of my clients where her husband was a builder and she was an attorney. I can't remember what type of an attorney, but they were both working and they had two daughters. And when she and I were working together, and she was the one that was wanting the divorce, um, she was very concerned because he hadn't been like the front row parent. So was he going to know who the girls' doctors were, who their dentists were, like if something happened, who to call? One of them struggled in English, one of them struggled in math. Is he going to know how to navigate that? She told me at one point, she's like, he doesn't even know what their favorite cereals are. He doesn't know when their birthdays are. He just knows, oh, the party's Saturday, show up. Everything else happens magically, right? I'm going to tell you what, I ran into her a year later after her divorce, and she said, my girls have a better relationship with their dad than they ever did when we were married. And I said, tell me more about that. Like, I love that. Tell me more. Why is that? And she said, because now he has to know. Right. And so now he knows all the things because it's on him to do. He just didn't have to do it before, but now he does. And it has benefited our girls. Our girls have a better relationship with their father. And that, like, no one thinks their kids are going to do better post divorce. I'm telling you, it is possible.
And because if she's no longer in fear, so they're not feeling like they have to protect mom and not and manage her emotions when they come back from dad. Like they can just be
Yes.
and happy or whatever emotions they're feeling is going to be okay because their parents hopefully are not putting their own emotions on them about their concerns. So that's I love that story. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the outcome we want for all our clients.
Yeah. It's beautiful,
All
really.
of
And it
them.
can happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be the textbook scenario. I mean, I feel like the textbook scenario of where kids suffer after divorce is primarily a function of how the adults in the building are handling the divorce, right?
Yeah,
It
it's absolutely that is that all the proof shows that.
yeah.
So, thank you so much, Sharon. So, as you know,
Yes.
I thought this was wonderful. I'm so glad we got to talk.
Yeah.
Of what do you offer up as your one better divorce tip?
Oh, okay. So I had one in mind and I thought of a different one. And I'm like, this is going to, and it really segues from what we were just talking about.
Okay.
If you're going through a divorce, you will be challenged 1,000 different ways, 1,000 times over the next 10 years in, do you really put your kids first? People will say, I will walk in front of a bus for my kids. There is nothing more important than my children. Really? Will you be kind when they're not being kind to you? Will you give them the benefit of the doubt when they're not giving you the same? Will you be gracious to your husband's new girlfriend because they're now in your children's lives? You're going to be challenged with that phrase. I put my kids first. There's nothing more important than my kids. I'd walk in front of a bus for my kids. Really? Would you? Because sometimes it's just, can you pump the brakes enough to be the adult in the room?
Yeah.
Right? And so keep that in mind. We say it, but do we mean it? You're going to be presented with, do you really mean it?
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is just, you know what? You are never going to feel comfortable through this process. You're not going to know what the future holds, but you will get through it. You will.
You will. That's great advice. And even when in the first scenario of are you putting your children first, would you do anything for your children by not biting your tongue?
Yeah.
You know how hard that might be by being gracious to the new partner.
Yeah.
It's going to be a challenge, but is it in the best interest of your children? And anything that's hard, we can get through. It just makes us stronger. It sounds like a cliche, but it's so true.
Hey, we do lots of hard things.
Yeah.
Human beings, we do tons of hard things every single day. This is another really hard thing, and you can do it.
It's the only way to grow,
Mm-hmm.
to do hard things.
That's it.
Otherwise, you stay unhappy.
Right.
So, thank you so much, Sharon. So how can people find you?
Well, you
What's
can
the best
go, I'm super easy to find. If you Google Sharon Pope and you go to sharonpope.com, you can find me. But if you want to get my best-selling book that has sold more than 300,000 copies, you can go to sharonpopebook.com.
Okay. And I don't think I mentioned the title of the book. So what's the title of the book?
The book is behind me. It's When Marriage Needs an Answer on Amazon. This is confusing. I know. It's also marketed under Stay or Go.
Okay.
Because on Amazon, it's one version. On Facebook, it's another. It's a whole
Okay.
like entrepreneurial stupid thing, but it's the exact same content with a different title. That is it. But if
Okay.
you look for When Marriage Needs an Answer, that's what it is.
Okay. And it will help you decide whether to stay or go.
It helps you get, how do I come to a decision? Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So to all that are listening, watching, if you know somebody contemplating divorce and needs some coaching, reach out to Sharon. And if you want to have the least adversarial divorce possible, if that's the direction you're going, you'll want to download our free ebook, Divorce Without Court, A More Peaceful Solution. And there's where we talk about the differences between mediation, the collaborative divorce process, help you find the best process for you to have the kind of divorce you're hoping for. You can click on the show links below and you can get that. We'll get that right out to you. Please like and subscribe, help others find the Better Divorce podcast, and we will see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of a Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.